Hello again, friends, and welcome back. Today, we are going to be talking about this fact that a sheriff and two sheriffs and a judge have been jailed. Astonishing enough. We're also going to be finishing up at the end of this presentation with our take on the United States election. We're also going to be covering briefly the John O'Boyle case that was recently heard in Castlebar. For those of you that don't know me, Stephen Manning from Integrity Ireland. S.O.S is the title of a lay litigant assistance book that we did, but it also stands for Stephen on Sunday, of course, even though today is Monday, but that's all right, guys. So big day tomorrow, the US elections. But I'm sure a few of you are scratching your heads and saying, what on earth is he talking about? Judge and sheriffs jailed 7 years for conspiracy to kidnap. And of course, the subtitle here is The System Protects Itself Again. And you're probably asking, what on earth is going on? All right. So we'll just start off here. It's from the BBC, this news this week. I think this is a very important news event that a lot of people, especially people in the pro-justice movement, or people, especially lay litigants, and also people who are trapped in the courts, both here and in the UK. Let's see if I can remove the little, what's the name at the top there, or we'll just replace it with Integrity Ireland for the time being. And yes, so the BBC News reported on this. Cult members jailed over coroner kidnap plot. Now, the simple version of this story is many people in the pro-justice movement will be familiar with syntax and grammar. The quantum grammar is one of the titles used. Now, this was initiated by a man called David Wynn Miller, who has since passed away, based in America. To cut a long story short, he had some very painful experience, as many of us do, with the so-called justice system over there, and over a period of time uncovered what he believed to be the serial abuse of language in a deceptive way by the authorities in order to deceive us and deny us our fundamental rights, the mainstream population. This links into the sovereign citizen movement as well. Now, we're not going to talk in any great detail about the overarching, these organizations and these ideologies themselves, other than to press home a solid point today. First of all, if the system is threatened in any way, right, I'll just make a statement that clarifies my position on the so-called justice systems. Certainly in Ireland, certainly in England. Ireland seems to be the best example, or the worst, the best example of a really terrible so-called justice system with politically appointed judges, and where Gardaí, for example, senior Gardaí are appointed by the government. You didn't know that, did you? So even if the Garda Commissioner is trying to do something, make some reforms in the Garda Síochána, he's stuck with the people that the government appoints in positions over superintendent. Okay, so the whole organization is political. The Garda Síochána is there to protect the political system. The judges are there to protect the political system. They wouldn't be appointed judges either. And very conveniently, on the day they do get appointed judges, they declare their independence by severing all ties, on paper at least, with their political affiliations. But of course, it's nonsense to assume or believe that when push comes to shove, that they're not going to get the occasional phone call or the whisper in the ear, and they're going to do exactly what they're expected to do for being rewarded with such a plush, lucrative position on the bench. Added to this, of course, is the inconvenient fact, but actually proven by psychological studies, that the highest percentage of sociopaths and psychopaths, which means people who don't care about other people, basically, are to be found in the legal profession and in the corridors of power of the international corporations. Big surprise there, huh? All right, so this is the news that 4 people were arrested and charged in the UK for attempting to arrest a coroner. Now, what we'll do is we'll just read this slide first before I explain it in a little bit more detail for you, friends. So, members of an anti-establishment cult, all right, note the use of derogatory language here, have been jailed for up to 7 years for storming a court with handcuffs and trying to kidnap a coroner. Mark Christopher, age 59, there in the red, guys with the red border, led the group that tried to shut down Essex Coroner's Court in Chelmsford, having accused senior coroner Lincoln Brooks of, quote, interfering with the dead, close quotes, in April 2023. Well, he's a coroner, you'd ask yourself, well, he's a coroner, he's supposed to be interfering with the dead, isn't he, in various different ways, trying to determine causes of death and all that sort of stuff. Well, we've had a similar experiences over here in County Mayo, where the local coroner is also the brother of a High Court judge, is deeply implicated in questionable, politically motivated decisions about suspicious deaths. That's probably the easiest way I can put it without detracting from this main story. But what we need to note here, first of all, is in the newspapers and on the BBC, they stormed the coroner's court. They were armed with handcuffs. Now, what this means is that 2 of them, the 2 gentlemen there, had handcuffs on their person. Thirdly, they were going to kidnap, and not at all. Their intention, right? First of all, these people absolutely believe that the coroner in question was engaged in criminal activity. They had written and advised him that he had to desist and stop under their understanding of the law. And then, having completely ignored the warnings or whatever, they advised him that they were going to come and take him into custody to do what with him? Not to kidnap him, not to lock him up in the Tower of London, but to transfer him into the custody of the police. They were going to take him to a police station and hand him over, right? Now, to a certain extent, you could argue this was a sort of a stunt, maybe a publicity stunt. And if you want to go online and look for it, you can find the videos of what actually happened. There's no shouting, there's no cursing and swearing. There is an occasion where a security officer, and he's warned, stand aside, But the interesting thing is the coroner, this, what's his name, Brooks character, wasn't even there, Lincoln Brooks. He wasn't even in the building, okay? So they got that bit wrong. And instead, they end up engaging with the assistant coroner, a woman there. And then they exit the building. One of them apparently is stopped on the way out of the building, the gentleman on the left, from what I can tell. And then they advanced, they went on to another public office somewhere to finish off the procedure that they were trying to conduct, and were arrested there. Okay, so now they've been charged with conspiracy to kidnap and conspiracy to falsely imprison. All right. Now, the reason I say that this is a classic example of the system protecting itself, I assure you, if the system wasn't scared of what these people were doing, this Mark Christopher would not have gotten 7 years in jail for it. Because, first of all, the person they were trying to kidnap, allegedly kidnap, wasn't even there, okay? Secondly, there was no violence, aggression, there was nothing at all. And thirdly, they had forewarned them that they were coming in to carry out this procedure. Now, the reason I'm making a big point of this, guys, is because we've done similar things over here in Ireland. We have, or I have personally, placed a High Court judge under arrest following Irish law. And I spoke to 2 guards in the court. I was placing him under arrest after many months, weeks and months of tortuous, unlawful activity by this judge, where he was trying to protect the system. I had been thrown in jail myself back in 2017 illicitly, unlawfully. The judge who did that had the good sense to retire unceremoniously the day before I was released from prison and things like that. But I've always followed the law. But there's a lesson to be learned here, because whether or not Mr. Christopher and his friends, two of which he'd assigned the title of sheriff to, whether or not what they did can be identified in any legal documents as being lawful. The point I'm trying to make here, guys, is it doesn't really matter. It has never been about the law. It has always been about power. If you have a system set up in a country where the government controls the judiciary, controls the police, controls the prisons, the courts, and so on and so forth, then frankly, it doesn't really matter how much you quote the law, how much research you do, how well you understand the law, because with a stroke of a pen, or even with a wave of an arm, they can turn any incident or any activity into something criminal, and then they will silence you. Okay? Now, the theories that Mr. Christopher has put forward, and I've listened to him on a few occasions. He's very articulate. He's very composed. He comes across as an extremely professional and very confident and competent. In this case, though, the English judge tried to paint him out as a sort of a con artist who was taking money from people in order to, flog them a dead horse, basically. And he was manipulative and deceitful. Well, I'll tell you something. This Mark Christopher did not walk into that coroner's court thinking he was going to get 7 years in jail. I'll tell you that much. So, whether or not you side with the judge, the English judge on this case, or with Mr. Christopher's position, which he's arguing is the superior position, the lawful position, the fact is he doesn't have the power, and the judge and the state does. And at the moment, he's facing 7 years in jail, of which he'll serve probably a minimum of 5 years. So noteworthy is the fact that he did not speak at all during his trial, which brings to mind, well, first of all, because the whole operation that he's involved in is to do with proving that the legal system as we know it is utterly fraudulent. And this is a position I would absolutely stand behind. As a matter of fact, first of all, you have to get to the understanding that in a perfect world, we would not need written laws. You might say, oh, human nature. Yeah, I know. That's why I said in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world. Law is a byproduct of the fact that, to talk about in biblical terms, it's a byproduct of the fall. There's no law in the Garden of Eden, so to speak. There's no religion either, come to think of it, when you start working this out. So law is there, even as Jesus said once, the law is there basically because we're too stupid to understand how to conduct our own lives. So they start off with 10 commandments carved in stone to keep us on the straight and narrow so that God, if you like, can continue to relate to us and we don't fall into utter debauchery and despair. But in this case here, and maybe think about it, the laws that have been mounting up and accumulating over the centuries, laws, after all, hardly ever does a law get pushed aside. It gets added to, or it gets amended, or it gets built upon. There's always more laws, more legislation all the time. Why? Because it's an attempt by the system, and a system that I refer to as a diabolical system, literally because it is representative of the worst elements of the, let's call it the satanic archetype, which is about controlling people and denying them access to their own moral, spiritual sovereignty, if you like. It's about control and doing, yes, sir, no, sir, do as you're told, or else you will get punished. Okay? So to move to the next slide, and I only see them as they arrive, guys, so that keeps the presentation a bit more lively. So I just will go to the pictures in a moment, guys. You see the Magna Carta on the right and one of the screenshots from Mr. Christopher's website. So this is the BBC reporting. The defendants were part of what law agencies called an organized, pseudo-legal commercial arguments group, usually defined as one that believes its interpretation of law supersedes a state's legal system. Members had self-conferred legal powers derived from what they believed to be the true meanings of words, the court heard. The group called itself the Federal Postal Court, also known as the Court of the People. Now, as you can see up here on the top left, global banning of common law. So this Mr. Christopher, who we'll see in a moment, says that he was tutored by Mr. William, we'll come to it in a moment. He was tutored anyway by the guy who discovered this hidden language. He is himself the chief federal postal court judge, okay, and has been acting with that authority and making these rather sweeping statements, the global banning of common law, by the chief federal postal court judge. And you'll see the punctuation there is not a mistake. This is much to do, if you're interested, go in and research it. It's an enthralling and fascinating research to be doing, looking at how there's all these hidden meanings in words, and it all links into the original birth certificate idea and the fact that we're actually corporations. We're not human persons, as you and I think we are, when we engage with these so-called justice agencies and the courts and the like. And it's all about commercial transactions going on behind our backs and without our knowledge. It's a little bit too complicated to go into today. I've got a fairly good grasp of it because I've had many people come and talk to me and try to convince me that I should be advancing these theories. But there's two issues now I want to bring to light here, okay? Okay, first of all, we use English, obviously, in this country as the main language, even though the Irish Constitution in the Irish language is supposed to supersede the English translation of it. Again, another field of study. It seems completely authentic. And then when you look at the translation of the Irish Constitution, you see that in the translation process, there have been a number of highly suspicious changes, with clauses being cut out and all the rest of it, as if someone, having noted that the Irish Constitution took precedence, decided when they translated into English, they get rid of a few inconvenient clauses. Now, of course, if this was what happened, then that would be illegal, unlawful, and unconstitutional, and would render any of the agencies using the translated version of the Constitution utterly invalid on paper, okay? On paper. And I can go into a court waving this piece of paper as much as I like, and all it takes is some obnoxious judge to look across, as literally happened to me, to look across and just nod like that. And the next thing you know, you've got a handful of burly guards beating the bejesus out of you, which happened to me. This is why they threw me in jail the first time, because I tried to prosecute the guards successfully, lawfully, legally, and they had no answer to it except to just haul me off a train, make false allegations against me, and jail me, breaking 22 international laws, and during which time in jail, the case against the guards just misted away as if it had never existed. Anyway, there's more to that than we can talk about today. So the point I'm trying to make is we're using English language here. And David Wynne Miller, that's the man who taught Mark Christopher his trade here, he had discovered all of these, and they are fascinating, absolutely. You go in and oh my Lord, well, what is a corporation? Oh, it's a corpse, a pirate operation, a corpse, a dead body, and so on and so forth. But the problem, the difficulty with the theory, and I'm not saying there aren't useful and fruitful informations to be found doing this, but the problem with this theory is that it centers on the English language. So you can only, in effect, claim that these sinister people have bastardized the English language on a scale that corresponds to English-speaking countries. Now, I know there's a lot of them out there, but once you then go to France, then you've got to start all over again with the French language, or the Spanish, or the Koreans, or the Mongolians, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. So you've got this fundamental problem that ever since the biblical Tower of Babel, there have been scores of different languages all over the world. So any theory that rests purely on the bastardization of the English language, at least you have to understand it. Well, we can only talk about it in context of the development of English law or law in English-speaking countries, in the Commonwealth countries and things like that. Now, still, I'm not saying there isn't information there that's hugely useful, but what's the response of the judges when you present this stuff in a court? As it says in the BBC report, they tend to dismiss it as gibberish, right? As nonsense, or as we heard in Castlebar Court last week by Judge Owen Garrivan dealing with the John O'Boyle case, which we'll get to in a moment. Nonsensical words just thrown up in the air and see where they land and then put them on paper and expect people to take them seriously, sort of thing. Now, there's three reasons why any judge sitting either in England or Ireland would make reference to these theories as gibberish or nonsense. One is because they sincerely believe that they are gibberish and nonsense, which is possible because don't forget they were schooled within the franchise, the legal system in Ireland or England. So it's possible that's all they've known. Number two, that they are completely ignorant of these theories because, speaking personally, as hopefully not a dunce, I've looked into these and there's a lot of very interesting and there's sufficient material in there to raise a lot of questions about what's going on in the current legal system. Or number three, they're scared of the possibility that people will latch onto this and actually learn stuff that will in turn expose the existing justice systems for the criminal organizations that they really are. All right, that's my take on it. I've got sufficient evidence to prove that the Irish and British justice systems, in effect, are criminal organizations in many different ways, but including examples that happened to me and my own family, where I'm trying to find out where it is here, to me and my own family over the years. There is no accountability for senior officers of the court or people who hold public office. There's simply no accountability. They know it. The rest of it is smoke and mirrors. It's an attempt to convince us that there's accountability when in fact there isn't. So this is Mark Christopher, and I just put this up to just help you understand in his own words. This is from his own website. Who am I? What do I do? That's his sheriff's badge up on the left there, judge and sheriff. So they've gone to a lot of time and effort, and I've got friends in Australia that are doing similar things apparently with more success, but then again, they've got the assistance of local law enforcement agencies who realize that on the national scale, things are getting out of control, and to bring it back locally, they're actually working together with these, let's call them citizens, sheriffs, and such like. Who am I? What do I do? I am a chief federal postal court judge, and my jurisdiction runs over any language within governments, courts, and corporations. Now, you notice he says here, any language, okay? If any citizens of the world launch a complaint with me, then I will also have jurisdiction. So he's claiming that we can go to him, as many people have done, and get a lawfully binding decision from him. I trained under the Chief Federal Postal Court Judge David Wynne Miller to do the things that he used to do before he passed away. And as you can see, the way they write their names and everything, it's all to do with the colons and the punctuation. And they believe that by putting the punctuation in this way, it actually gives a power and authority to the words that cannot be ignored by the existing status quo. All right, that's what they believe. And I'll make the point again. And to use an anecdote, Vladimir Putin decides he's going to invade Canada through Alaska, over the land bridge, the sea bridge into Alaska. So this becomes knowledge and common knowledge, and the Canadians say, he can't do that. And everybody around the world says, no, that would be a violation of international war rules or whatever, and they go to the international courts of justice. And the international courts of justice agree, and they say, no, naughty boy, Mr. Putin. This is against the law, and you can't do it. And he says, can't I? Watch me. Who's going to stop me? You and whose army, literally, okay? If he has more guns, bullets, bombs, and soldiers, and he decides that he's going to exercise that power, there's no piece of paper in the world is going to stop him. And I hope I'm making this point really clear to a lot of my friends and colleagues in the pro-justice movement who keep believing that by getting the paperwork right, they're going to win a case in the Irish courts. You're not going to, guys, not if the decision has been made against you. And again, to repeat the issue here, guys, ultimately, we've got to change the system, all right? I'm doing a lot of videos and talks about this at the moment, trying to get people to understand the central reality that any system, any autocratic top-down system that requires you to surrender your own moral authority is diabolical. It's as simple as that. We are gifted with a spirit that is capable of connecting with the divine. And as long as we're trying our best to be decent and honorable and everything and willing to listen and willing to learn, we literally don't need anybody telling us what to do. We go seeking out advice from people who know better than us. We learn from them, and we hope then in turn to be an example to our fellow human beings as to good behavior and everything, all right? But this has gotten out of control globally, guys. Absolutely out of control. The authorities are out of control. The so-called elites, most of them are sociopaths and psychopaths. They're not to be trusted. And any system like this that threatens or promises to educate the people about the nefarious activities that these people are up to, because that's one of the side effects of Mark Christopher's work, is drawing attention that we need some alternative to these corrupt courts and these sinister diabolical judges. We have to find some sort of an alternative, because it's simply not acceptable to live in a world where all of the senior positions of authority and control are in the hands of these diabolical sociopaths. It's just not acceptable. Now, of course, there's a few exceptions to the rule. Elon Musk, for one, we'll come to him in a minute. Okay. So to move to the next slide then, this is a continuation of what Mr. Christopher was saying. If the general public are asking themselves what I do by not by, oh, just a moment. Of course, when it swings up like that, I can't read it myself. Let me just make it smaller again for a second, guys. If the general public are asking themselves, what do I mean by jurisdiction over any language within corporation and governments? What this means is that if any government, institution, corporation that has not given you a dictionary or a correct language performance with its letters, its legalities, its laws, or its claims, has fully violated the basic rules of communication. If the basic rules of communication are violated, then there is no contracting parties for one to claim jurisdiction over the other. The job of the Chief Federal Postal Court judges is to stop and correct all misleading statements, false and fictitious. Now, in other words, this is quite a noble enterprise. The simple premise is this, guys. If I have a contract with you and you, let's say you sign a contract without reading the small print, okay? The fact that you put your signature to it with saying you've read the small print, even though everybody knows you haven't, okay? That binds you to that contract because it's all been laid out in writing what you're agreeing to. Many times, these corporations, governments, and other so-called contracting parties are entering into contracts with us without actually telling us precisely and exactly what it is they're doing. They're often lying to us, deceiving us, using the small print to mislead. Or in the case of the court systems, they use what? Legalese. But legalese, which is the language used in court, is a mixture of pig Latin and bastardized English, actually, to a certain extent. And you'll be standing there as a lay litigant, utterly bewildered. What on earth are they talking about? And the judge nodding sagely and the barrister waffling on, and a decision's made, and you go, what just happened? I wouldn't let them do that, for example. When I was in a court, I'd say, sorry, stop. I don't understand what you're talking about. There's no shame in it. I don't understand because you're deliberately trying to deceive me by talking in gobbledygook and this legalese and using, as a matter of fact, if you look at many, many legal documents, look at the punctuation in it. It's the one thing that's almost completely absent. The reason, including, court documents and, state issued legislation and such like. Yeah, you have a look at it, and there's a reason for the punctuation being absent, because it opens the door there for various different interpretations of what's been written. You put the inflection on one word where a comma should be, there is no comma, it runs on and it can mean something completely different, okay? So watch out for that as well, guys. So what he's saying is if the government or the corporations have entered into a contract with you and they've either deceived you or misled you or are using tricky language, which is what this operation of his was all about, then the contract is null and void. Obviously, the system, the courts, the states, the governments, corporations can't have people like this Mark Christopher wandering around educating people that they're probably and possibly being tricked and deceived on a daily basis. They can't have that because they're going to lose the money, aren't they? They're going to lose the moolah. One of the reasons why he ended up getting 7 years, guys. Just drawing attention here briefly, guys, to the Integrity Ireland project, which to a greater or lesser extent is similar, but we don't delve into the convoluted misuse of words and all that sort of stuff. We simply point out things like lies, deceptions, abuse of power and position by authority figures, and what you can do about it lawfully. That is according to their laws. Because if you remember, you go back to something like the Magna Carta, and how many people tell us, it's the Magna Carta was the source of all common law, for example. And that's where you have to go back to. And you go, yeah, it's all right, me going back and quoting the Magna Carta in an Irish court of law, and the judge goes, haul him out. Or shut up, we're not listening to that gibberish, that doesn't apply here. Because all they've got to do is, and on a whim, clip their fingers, and the obedient guards and court service staff and lawyers that are scared of affecting their careers and wouldn't dare challenge a judge, when they know he's lying or being a bully and all the rest of it. That's the problem. It's power. It's the misuse of power, guys. So again, I was just briefly showing you the Integrity Ireland webpage. The book's on the top right there, which, for instance, on the top right, criminality in the Irish courts, and here, I'll have to pop it up here like that because you can't see it very well. Criminality in the Irish courts in the absence of the rule of law. How did I get away with writing a book that names 40 judges and 60 office holders, including senior politicians and the Chief Justice himself, in criminal activity? They didn't come after me publicly over it. Nobody's tried to sue me or anything. The book is still available online. How could this be possible? And I'll tell you why. It's because I write the book, the whole book, the premise of writing the book is I'm fulfilling my lawful obligations according to Irish law to report serious crime when I'm aware of it. It's one of the laws, the obligatory laws on us, guys. If you can actually be done if you're either a witness or a participant or an observer in crime, and certain crimes, serious crimes, and you don't report them. That's the premise upon which I wrote the book. And I put it right in the front page. I'm fulfilling my obligation under section blah, blah, blah to do this. So if you think you're going to come after me for doing it, then you'll have to explain how and why I have stayed silent when I know that all of you career liars and moral deviants in positions of power and authority have been doing this, visiting this on the Irish public with impunity for years. Yeah. Another thing that we did, guys, draw attention to this. This is the Asseverations page, which, again, those of you that are interested in defending yourself, I had a long chat the other day with a colleague, quite a well-known colleague of mine, who's facing huge punitive costs against him that he certainly didn't deserve. And again, it's a consequence of being so sort of set up and framed by the system. But one of the things we did, you see the Asseverations there, top left, Asseverations. Please go into the Integrity Ireland website, look at this. We've created documents. The largest size is 4 pages, and all of them are condensed into one page. They ask key questions relating to justice, and they give you a solid answer. And you can walk into a court with these documents. They cannot be challenged by the establishment because they're based on Irish law. What they do, in effect, is remove the need for lawyers, judges, court processes, or anything like that, because the question is asked and it's answered, and the reasons given for why it is. It's one of the ways that we advocate for dealing with corrupt, officials, court officials, Gardaí, lawyers, and judges. And on the top right there, you see the PTI little logo. You see that? That's the People's Tribunal of Ireland. Now, interestingly, some of you can go in now and try and find it online. For some reason, I can't find it on my own equipment. I had a friend check. They were able to go in and find it. So clearly there's some blocking going on. I've also having a lot of interference in communications and emails of late. People are sending me important stuff that I need to look at. I'm sending back to them. We end up having to revert to other platforms to communicate with each other. This is a symptom of centralized authority getting out of control, guys. But if you go into the People's Tribunal of Ireland, that's another totally lawful. Now, for instance, nobody can come after me and arrest me for having set up the People's Tribunal of Ireland with colleagues as an attempt to counteract all of the illegitimacy and unlawfulness and criminal activity going on in Irish courts, because the law allows for us to do it. Anyway, if you're interested, guys, find that. Have a look at the determinations in the People's Tribunal of Ireland. Have a look at the Asseverations on the Integrity Ireland website and educate yourself a little bit as to how crooked this system is. My first piece of advice to anybody now these days, if they're in trouble in the courts, my first piece of advice to them is, can you extricate yourself? Because whatever means or methodology, lawful means or methodology you can use to extricate yourself, get away from them. These are not honorable people. They are not decent people. Even some of the people in the lower ranks that might be very nice individuals and pleasant people to have a pint with if you go down the pub or something, and even good, mothers, fathers, members of the community and everything. But the ultimate reality is that they are trapped in a system that demands their obedience to the system, not to their morals and their ethics and their consciences. Please understand that, guys. So you're up against a diabolical construct. We've got to start understanding this, and we've got to start thinking and imagining a society without all of these institutions, what it would look like. We talk about it a little bit in the book, the Crisis Cult or Coup book, which I just popped up there on the right for you guys. If you haven't seen it and read it, guys, I advise you to do so. It's based around the pandemic, but it's not old news, guys, because it explains the nature of institutionalized evil and what we've got to do about it and the main characters that are involved. Okay, so let's keep going. We don't have a lot today. Oh yeah, I wanted to make this point as well. Now, this is also in the BBC report. The icons I've stuck in there myself. Christopher, this is Mark Christopher of Claremont Road, East London, whatever, was also found guilty of sending a letter or email with intent to cause distress or anxiety. Can you believe this, guys? Can you believe this? Yeah. So it's a crime to send a letter or an email with the intent to cause distress or anxiety. Who decides whether or not you had that intent? Well, you, of course, surely. Who knows what my intentions are if I send a letter or an email to someone? No, it's them. They decide that you had malicious intent or you intended to cause distress or anxiety. Well, you know what? Some of these career criminals, like judges, they don't like being told that they're crooks. They just don't like it. Well, I suppose technically that's causing them some distress or anxiety. I've just committed a crime. Huh? We've got to be very careful about this, guys. We've got to be alert to it. This is insidious. It's creeping up on us. We've hardly noticed it. The so-called hate speech bill with Helen McEntee and her cronies. These people have the amount of destruction they're causing to communities and to families and to individuals, and then the gender laws and all the rest of it. The amount of destruction they're causing, one can only hope and pray that there is such a place as hell, because there has to be a reckoning. At some point, there has to be a reckoning for what these people are doing. But the point I'm making here with my silly icons and stuff is these people are terrified of thing. And the guy, we'll see his face in a moment. The man who, the coroner in England, he, remember I told you, he wasn't even there when they, quote, stormed the building. They walked in, the four of them walked in and said, right, we're here looking for so-and-so, we want to serve this notice on him. He was in his car driving to work. He was late. I bet he didn't get punished for that. So he was driving to work, and his assistant called him and told him, these guys are in the office looking for you with a notice. They want to take you to the police station. Apparently, this poor soul is so sensitive that he had to stop his car, and he's had nightmares ever since, and he's been worried about the safety of his family. I mean, this was his victim impact statement that he delivered to the court in order to shore up the judge's decision to jail Mr. Christopher for 7 years. They had to sort of milk it and milk it and milk it and turn what was a relatively innocuous stunt that embarrassed the system into a major, federal offense, so to speak. All right. The same with the John O'Boyle case here in Ireland, coming up here. Yeah. Now this case too, as you can see, if you want to go find more about it, go look for the People's Paper, guys, and online. You'll find it online. The framing of John O'Boyle. I was at his hearing last week in court. Now, before I say anything further, the good news is that the judge, Owen O'Garavan, in my opinion anyway, tried his best to do the right thing, given the fact that John O'Boyle had been found guilty by a jury, not of his peers, however. If I believe what I'm told that the people on the jury were basically handpicked. Some of them apparently even worked for the court service. Now, I don't have a proof of that, but this is what I was told. If that's the case, then we see how even juries, where you hope and pray that a jury of your peers, it's supposed to be people like you, yeah, that they will understand your motivation. But in the case of John Boyle, the truth of the matter is that he was framed by 3 members of An Garda Síochána who lied that he had driven at one of their members and struck him with his vehicle. Now, there's a video and you look at it for yourself, guys, you'll see what's happening. The guard is trying to talk to him on his own private property, talking to him through a window. And John, no doubt, irritated at them being there in the first place because they've been harassing him because he didn't comply with the COVID regulations and so on. He decides, I'm not listening to your nonsense anymore, and his vehicle pulls away. The guard walks away quite easily without any problem, and later puts in a claim of compensation for all the injuries, goes to a specialist doctor who likewise should be named and shamed for being in on the scam, and then makes a claim against the Garda Compensation Board for, the point I'm making is that these wilting wallflowers, this coroner in England and these despicable, dishonest Gardaí who will make compensation claims for injuries that they never got in order to try and, paint a blacker picture of an offence and so on, and in order to make illicit money when they don't deserve it. I mean, it's, all of a sudden they're poor, delicate little wilting wallflowers, like it said, that, I was so upset that these people went into my office when I wasn't there. But you know what? I've had nightmares ever since, Judge. And this is, and what did the judge? This is the English judge referred to him as being in a quasi-judicial vocational role. Quasi-judicial, everything is a lie, guys. Almost everything that they're involved in is a lie, and we have to understand it. Now, the other 2 people I've mentioned here, this is in John's case, the John O'Boyle case. High Court Judge Mark Sanfey, I mention him because this guy, apparently as a barrister, I think it was him, was instrumental in keeping Julian Assange jailed, and so on. That's right. He was on the attack against him on behalf of the system. He gets rewarded, gets made a judge. I've been in front of him when I was trying to get in to see my critically ill wife in hospital a couple of years ago. This man was instrumental in facilitating an obvious documentary fraud that allowed the hospital, Beaumont Hospital, to move my wife while she was basically in a coma against all the rules and regulations to stop me from getting an emergency order out of the High Court. And he just said, oh, I can only deal with what's in front of me, you know? And I said, but it's a fraudulent document, Judge. It's been altered by one of your court service staff. I know him. I've got his name. Bring him in here and let's put my proper document in front of you. Oh, no. And my wife sadly never recovered. But I don't drift off subject, but she never recovered, guys, from them illicitly moving her in order to protect the system and the unlawful COVID legislation that was in at the time. We were ready to expose it and defeat it. They couldn't have that. The other guy down there, Barrister Patrick Reynolds, also was involved in cases with me years back. I saw quite a number of these amoral people in the court. I haven't been in a court for a while. Into Castlebar Court, there's several of them there. Another barrister, Ken Kerins, who tried to present forged summonses to a judge, and the judge said to him, he said, there's no signature on them, Judge, and he tried to dismiss my case against 4 guards who had beaten me up. And the judge looked at him and said, actually, barrister, I signed those. So they run them through a photocopier in order to get, to erase the signatures and then present them in court as evidence, and nothing happened to them. I mean, this is what you're up against, guys. These are barristers working for the state. And this Patrick Reynolds too, he's just a toady of the system. Toady of the system, keeps getting promoted because he keeps on doing the bidding of the diabolicals. I hope you're proud of yourself, gentlemen. Here's the incident with John O'Boyle. Down there on the bottom left, this is the, I don't want you to misunderstand, this is Lincoln Brooks, the coroner in the UK that I was just talking about. I've just slipped him in there in the space. But the white car at the top of the picture, the Jeep on the left, that's John O'Boyle on his own golf course, going off to do his work. The guard in the center of the picture, the policeman, it's not a great picture, but there is a CD up there and a video, you can watch it. He's walking away, clearly hasn't sustained any of his alleged injuries. There's nothing wrong with him. Apparently, he spends an hour and a half with his buddies. 5 Garda cars turn up. They were out to get John, and they then made a huge meal out of him driving away and claimed that he'd actually tried to, basically a hit and run, ridiculous, totally ridiculous, blown out of all proportion. And then he was facing a jail sentence. But as I said, the good news is that Judge Owen O'Garavan, whilst making a point that, look, the jury's found him guilty, my hands are tied, I've got to do something here. But he said, he did make points saying, well, look, this blow and the injuries the guard he claimed to have suffered, all the injuries, and I wouldn't describe it as a blow by the vehicle. And so anyway, he was stuck also as a judge. He's got to do his job and whatever. But at the very least, anyway, he just gave John a suspended sentence, a 2-year sentence, suspended for 3 years, I believe. He got fined as well, pretty hefty fine, and banned from driving for a couple of years, whatever. But and afterwards, John quite rightly said the whole reason he went through the whole procedure, and it kept exposing it at every turn, was to show the public, which is what I keep telling people, if you're stuck in these court proceedings, then the one thing you have to do is regard them as an opportunity to expose the corruption. Okay, and the previous judge I showed you a moment ago, Mark Sanfey, up in the High Court, that barrister Patrick Reynolds, we'll just go back to them there just for a second. We're nearly done here, guys. Barrister Patrick Reynolds apparently said to Judge Garavan in open court that High Court Judge Mark Sanfey had issued an order from the High Court that the case had to go ahead because John and his followers, his supporters, were trying to get an application in the High Court to have it stopped. Apparently, that was an outrageous, barefaced, bald-faced lie. And nobody has come after the barrister for doing so. That's the information I've been given anyway. So now let's move on. I think our next topic now, the topic of the day. We've only got a few minutes left, guys. Let's crash through this. Tomorrow, they're all going to the polls. Now, as it says in the beginning, this is just my take on the presidential elections, all right? Very simply, I the mainstream media keeps telling us that it's neck and neck. I think that's hogwash, personally. Either that or America has lost its mind, because it's so obvious that Kamala Harris and by Joe Biden before her are tools of the establishment. They're there to protect the system. She's had so many failings, mistakes, and failures in the various interviews she has done. Anybody who's paying attention, how could you possibly have confidence in a woman like this? I just don't know. Now, of course, Donald Trump isn't perfect, but none of us are, okay? But again, we just put this thing together here. Just one thing we know about Donald Trump is that he has never drunk, he's never had drugs, he's never had alcohol, and he's never smoked cigarettes. Now, all I'm saying about this, okay, arguably he's done a few other naughty things, or so we're told. It seems to be how would you put it? It seems to be the failing of many great men particularly in political life. For example, JFK, all of the great and wonderful noble things he did, but then we hear that he had this weakness on the side, the sexual weakness. Martin Luther King Jr., another one, and so on. It seems to be, and interestingly, isn't it, that my position is that the original fall was a sexual fall. So, if Satan's going to get at people, this is where they're going to come. The first thing they did with me when I crossed the system 15, 20 years ago was they accused me of sexual impropriety around children. Of course they do, because it's the demonic thing to do. But Kamala likes a drink, arguably. There's been a few occasions when she's on telly and you're scratching your head going, was that a glass of vodka or is it a glass of water in front of her? Because she does seem to exhibit some hysterical traits from time to time. But what the point I'm making here again, guys, now, of course, she isn't Hunter Biden. But I've seen some of the materials that came off his laptop. He's clearly smoking a crack pipe. That's only a cigarette there, He's got photographs with, now it's just the type of person he is and the type of person, if you're one of the Trump children growing up, and your dad's telling you all the time, no cigarettes, no alcohol, no drugs, please, and setting an example himself. I mean, you've got to admire the discipline of that, at least. I like a drink myself, but you've got to admire the fact, and on occasions I go off it as a condition, for 40 days at a time and things like that, just to maintain my own personal discipline and make sure that I'm in control of things. But I think this is an admirable trait in a man who's running to be president, that he's taken these stands in his life, and this is one of the arguments for why he's arguably much healthier than he might look, according to the doctors, But, this whole Hunter Biden thing has been covered up. How come he had a position on Burisma, the gas board in Ukraine, that was paying him thousands of dollars a month, Who was the big guy that was getting kickbacks from these deals? And I've seen, and you see the heading there, Biden child porn shock. Guys, do some research and ask yourself, what sort of caliber of family is this? What sort of people are some of these leading Democrats, the Obamas, the Clintons, and their supporters too, and dare I say it, some of the celebrities that are supporting them as well. I wouldn't be in any hurry to be parading Jennifer Lopez on stage after her associations with P. Diddy and the like. Don't forget, they're actors, these people. They're in the limelight all the time, Oprah Winfrey, Whoopi Goldberg, Taylor Swift. So stick to entertainment, guys. You're far too opinionated for people who have lived inside the Hollywood cocoon for most of your lives, far too opinionated. Here's another example, right? Here it says Trump just lost Georgia by 11,000 votes. That was on the internet on Sunday. What they're not telling you is that quote came from the election 4 years ago. So why are they running it as a banner on Sunday, 2 days before everyone goes to the polls? It's all about psychological training and conditioning, trying to get people to panic and think that he's the same with the poll up in Iowa. I don't believe it. I don't believe that that's a genuine poll at all. They said that Kamala Harris suddenly won it, and it was previously a Republican state. I don't believe it at the moment. I mean, we'll wait and see what happens. But if there's a way to cheat, they're going to do it because they are liars. They're career liars. And to prove this point, and we're down to the last few minutes, guys, last couple of minutes. This is a post by Elon Musk on the left. How do you tell who's telling the truth? The ones trying to silence other people are the ones who are lying. And very interestingly, guys, and I'll just pull this up here a little bit. You say, who's trying to silence Trump? They've weaponized the law to go after him. He's had 2 assassination attempts. This is all because he is a threat to the system. Kamala Harris is no threat to the system. As it says here, she got her start in politics by having an affair with powerful political sugar daddy Willie Brown, who was twice her age. Brown got her appointments to high-paying plum positions on state commissions, gave her a BMW, and set her political career up. She dumped him once she didn't need him. She no longer needed him. Not somebody that I would personally admire. And sadly here, guys, got the picture of Satan there at the bottom, all right? Kamala, and that says I-Y-E-R, I believe. It could be L-Y-E-R, but I-Y. That, believe it or not, was her birth name, her middle name. Look it up, guys, all right? K-A-M-A-L-A-H-A-R-R-I-S. If you add up the subtotals of the letters of her name, A is 1, B is 2, it comes to 112. Divided by, unfortunately, it's slipped down there. This happens sometimes with these slides. Divided by 6, the number of imperfection, and you get 18.666 recurring. 3 6s are 18. Need I say any more? Those of you who know your Bibles. And very quickly, guys, in the last couple of minutes, please feel free to freeze these slides and look at them in more detail. But this is the diabolical pyramid that we're all locked into, okay, where the autocratic, authoritarian systems dictate to us what we can and cannot do. All right, this is not the heavenly model. This is the diabolical model. And we'll move on to the next slide. That on the right is the collaborative democratic model. That's how it should look like. All right, not like what we've got on the left. Again, please feel free to freeze the screen and examine these in more detail. Finally, I'm suggesting, the second last slide here, that this team, although they will slip into the top notches, if they get through, they'll get in, and they will be in charge of these systems to start with, okay? But their objective is to start to dismantle them. And that's what we need, friends. That's what their objective is. And I think he's got a pretty impressive team here of decent men to start this process off. Finally, if you want to freeze the slide, this is where you can find more information on what we do, how we do it. Thank you again, friends. I hope this falls well. And I do see the hand of the providence on Trump's shoulder, not because he's perfect, because he isn't, but he's the best option in a very corrupted pool of debaucherous career liars and moral deviants. If Trump is in, I think we've got a chance. If he isn't, watch out. God bless everyone. Thank you for listening.